Welcome back to our channel. The world is constantly shifting, with numerous significant events unfolding across the globe. Today, we delve into a fascinating aspect of international relations and travel: the countries that present the most significant barriers, or are outright inaccessible, for American citizens. Have you ever pondered why certain nations practically bolt their doors when Americans approach? Why does that blue passport, often perceived as a key to the world, suddenly fail to unlock every border as it once might have? It is not an arbitrary phenomenon, nor is it solely attributable to political maneuvering. And contrary to common assumptions, safety concerns are not always the primary driver. Some countries have established firm boundaries, creating environments where entry for Americans is nearly impossible. We will explore 10 such nations, examining the complex tapestry of reasons behind these restrictions, from historical tensions and recent political decisions to ongoing conflicts and stringent government controls. Stay with us as we navigate this intricate geopolitical landscape. We promise to provide detailed insights and will offer concluding thoughts at the end of this exploration. A lot has happened recently, and we aim to shed light on these critical situations. Please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. Your support is crucial for our growth and allows us to continue bringing you informative content like this. Also, drop a comment below, letting us know where you are watching from. We love connecting with our global audience. Certain nations have effectively drawn an impenetrable line, making visits extraordinarily challenging, if not impossible, for American passport holders. Sometimes these limitations stem from long-standing diplomatic friction, while other times they are the result of recent policy shifts or volatile internal situations. Take, for instance, the impact of past administrations. Policies enacted during the Trump era, such as specific travel bans targeting several Muslim-majority countries, certainly exacerbated existing tensions and contributed to a climate of restricted access and mutual suspicion. These actions sent ripples across the international community, sparking global outrage and leading to reciprocal measures or heightened scrutiny from affected nations and their allies. The breakdown of established alliances and the general rise in global political tensions during that period further complicated the landscape for American travelers. While some of these specific bans have since been rescinded or modified, the residual effects linger. The perception of the United States and its citizens shifted in many parts of the world, and the bureaucratic hurdles or outright prohibitions put in place often remain, sometimes formally, sometimes informally, through increased visa denial rates or more rigorous vetting processes. Therefore, if you believe your American passport grants unrestricted passage anywhere on the globe, it is time for a reality check. Be sure to watch this video until the very end, as we will be summarizing our key findings and offering concluding perspectives. Number 10. North Korea. This nation stands as one of the most isolated and enigmatic places on Earth. It is a country where time itself operates uniquely, quite literally running on its own standard time set by governmental decree, known as Pyongyang time, half an hour different from South Korea and Japan until recent adjustments. North Korea is a place so intensely controlled that nearly every facet of a visitor's experience, should they manage to enter, is meticulously managed. From your mobile phone, which might be confiscated or heavily monitored, to the clothes you wear, needing to adhere to modest standards, and even extending to your expressed thoughts and opinions. Everything is subject to intense scrutiny and potential inspection by state officials. This level of oversight is not hyperbole or science fiction. It is the documented reality of visiting the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK. For American citizens, the door to North Korea has been firmly shut since September 2017. This comprehensive travel ban was implemented by the U.S. State Department following the tragic death of Otto Warmbier, an American student who was detained during an organized tour and suffered severe neurological injury while imprisoned, dying shortly after his return to the U.S. The State Department continues to issue its highest level warning, Level 4, Do Not Travel, citing the serious and ongoing risk of arrest and long-term detention for American citizens. The U.S. government explicitly prohibits its citizens from entering North Korea using a U.S. passport without a special validation, which is granted only under extremely limited circumstances, typically for compelling humanitarian reasons or official U.S. government travel. Even these humanitarian visits require painstaking special permission from both the U.S. and North Korean authorities, and approvals are exceptionally rare. What might truly surprise you is that while Americans face this near-absolute ban, tourists from some other countries can technically visit North Korea, usually through highly structured and rigidly monitored group tours originating from China. These tours operate under strict surveillance, with guides accompanying visitors at all times, dictating itineraries, and ensuring no deviation from the approved path or interaction with locals outside controlled settings. However, for Americans, there is virtually no chance of obtaining such access. North Korea remains one of the very few destinations on the planet where simply holding an American passport results in an automatic denial of entry, slamming the door shut based on citizenship alone. It is a stark reminder of the deep political chasm and lack of diplomatic relations between the two countries. You might be astonished by what other nations feature on this list of restricted destinations. Number 9. Iran. Have you ever attempted to arrange an international trip, only to discover that your nationality itself is the primary obstacle leading to a visa rejection? This is precisely the situation many Americans encounter when considering travel to Iran. Welcome to the Islamic Republic of Iran, a country where U.S. citizens face significantly more hurdles and restrictions than travelers from almost any other nation on Earth. The relationship between the United States and Iran has been fraught with tension and hostility for decades, tracing back to the Iranian Revolution of 1979 and the subsequent hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Relations have ebbed and flowed, but reached a particularly low point during the Trump administration. Several key events during this period significantly heightened tensions and solidified travel barriers. The implementation of the 2017 travel ban, often referred to as the Muslim ban, explicitly listed Iran among several countries whose citizens faced severe restrictions on entering the U.S., a move that naturally provoked reciprocal sentiment and policies. Furthermore, the U.S. withdrawal from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, in May 2018, and the subsequent reimposition of harsh economic sanctions pushed relations to a boiling point. The cumulative result of this long history and recent escalations is that Americans are effectively barred from straightforward travel to Iran. Tourist visas for U.S. citizens are notoriously difficult to obtain and require travelers to be part of an organized tour with a government-approved guide for the entire duration of their stay. Independent travel is generally not permitted. Even journalists and academics, who might typically have avenues for professional visits, face immense struggles in getting their visas approved. And here is a critical point. Entry is only half the battle. The U.S. State Department maintains a Level 4, do not travel advisory for Iran, explicitly warning of the high risk of kidnapping, arrest, and detention of U.S. citizens, particularly dual U.S.-Iranian nationals. Several Americans have been wrongfully detained in Iran on unsubstantiated charges, often used as political pawns. The advisory flatly states, do not travel to Iran. There is no functioning U.S. embassy in Tehran to provide consular assistance if things go wrong. U.S. citizens needing emergency services must rely on the foreign interests section at the Swiss embassy, which offers very limited support. Consider this stark reality. Iran, a country boasting millennia of ancient history, breathtaking architecture from Persepolis to Isfahan's mosques, and a vibrant, complex culture, remains largely off-limits. If you are an American, due to the deep-seated political animosity and the tangible risks involved, visiting Iran is akin to attempting travel to another planet, possible only under the strictest conditions and fraught with potential peril. Number 8. Libya. Are you envisioning your next travel adventure? Now, picture arriving at an airport that is barely functional, perhaps damaged by conflict or operating sporadically. Imagine stepping out into a city divided, where different armed factions control various districts, and their authority is mutually unrecognized, leading to unpredictable clashes and instability. This challenging scenario accurately depicts the reality travelers, especially Americans, would confront in Libya, assuming they could even secure entry in the first place. For U.S. citizens, Libya is essentially shut off. The U.S. Embassy in Tripoli suspended all operations back in July 2014 due to the escalating violence and deteriorating security situation following the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. It has not reopened since. The reason is stark. The country remains deeply fractured. Rival governments vie for control. Powerful militias command significant territories, including major cities and critical infrastructure, and the security landscape is characterized by crime, terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, and ongoing armed conflict. The U.S. State Department consistently maintains its highest travel warning, Level 4, Do Not Travel, for Libya. This advisory underscores the extreme risks faced by any U.S. citizen considering travel to the country. There is no U.S. government presence on the ground to provide assistance. This means no consular support, no established evacuation plans, and no embassy doors to knock on if you find yourself in trouble. If things spiral downwards, there is no cavalry coming to the rescue. Foreigners, and particularly Americans, have been explicitly targeted for violence and wrongful detention in Libya. Reports detail individuals being held for weeks, sometimes even months, without clear cause or any means of communication with the outside world. Even if one were contemplating a visit for tourism, which is practically non-existent in the current climate, the infrastructure is simply not there. There are no reliable, regulated tour agencies, no dependable accommodations that meet international safety standards, and absolutely no guarantee that the road you are driving on will not suddenly become an active conflict zone. The control of airports, roads, and checkpoints can shift frequently and unpredictably between various armed groups. This isn't merely danger, it's extreme unpredictability. This volatile combination of factors makes Libya one of the most inaccessible and perilous places for Americans in the entire world. According to the U.S. Department of State, the risk is simply too high, rendering the country a complete no-go zone for its citizens. If you still believe these warnings might be overly cautious, consider the international aid agencies that have withdrawn staff or the pilots who refuse to fly into certain Libyan airports because control changes hands almost weekly. Libya is not just off the beaten path. It is a zone of profound instability, where the risks far outweigh any potential reason for non-essential travel for U.S. nationals. Number 7. Syria. Imagine a landscape where vibrant cities have been reduced to desolate rubble by years of brutal conflict, where the echoes of airstrikes still punctuate the night, and where crossing from one town to the next means navigating borders watched not just by soldiers, but by deep-seated suspicion and competing armed factions. This is the grim reality of Syria, and for American citizens, entry into this war-torn nation is nearly impossible and extraordinarily dangerous. Let us be unequivocally clear. Syria has been under a Level 4, Do Not Travel advisory issued by the U.S. State Department for many years, reflecting the extreme dangers present. The reasons are numerous and severe: terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, ongoing armed conflict, and the risk of arbitrary detention by the Assad regime or various armed groups, including remnants of ISIS. The brutal civil war, which began in 2011, continues to simmer, even if it no longer dominates daily international headlines. The risks associated with the conflict have not disappeared. In fact, due to power vacuums and complex regional dynamics, some areas might be even more perilous now than before. The U.S. Embassy in Damascus ceased operations and suspended its services way back in February 2012. Consequently, there is absolutely no U.S. consular support available within Syria. Americans finding themselves in distress have no official U.S. entity to turn to for assistance. But the danger extends beyond the immediate violence. Americans have been specifically targeted for detention, have disappeared without a trace, and tragically, some have been killed within the region. Even individuals entering for seemingly legitimate purposes, like journalism or humanitarian aid work, face extreme scrutiny and potential danger. Your digital footprint alone could be enough to raise red flags with Syrian authorities or militant groups. If you have ever posted anything online critical of the Assad regime, U.S. foreign policy in the region, or specific factions involved in the conflict, you are already at heightened risk. Furthermore, the country's infrastructure is largely non-existent in many areas. Hospitals, roads, and basic services have been destroyed or are controlled by militants. Reliable communication, including GPS, is often unavailable, with some areas completely off-grid. What makes the situation even more treacherous is the deceptive sense of calm that might prevail in certain government-controlled zones. Just because a city isn't currently under active bombardment does not mean it is safe. Arbitrary arrests can occur for perceived infractions as minor as carrying the wrong document, taking a photograph in a sensitive area, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Access itself is a major hurdle. Americans are not permitted to fly directly into Syria. There are no commercial airline routes from the U.S. or connecting partner routes that facilitate such travel. Any entry would require attempting a hazardous land border crossing, likely through Lebanon or Turkey, where you risk being turned away, or far worse, detained at the border. Human rights organizations continuously raise alarms about the dire situation, but the extreme danger persists. For Americans, Syria represents not just a travel restriction, but a lethal hazard zone. The risks overwhelmingly outweigh any conceivable reason for visiting. It remains firmly off-limits, a hard stop dictated by years of conflict and instability. Number 6. Yemen. Consider a scenario where the official travel advice isn't just a warning against visiting, but an urgent directive for any citizens currently in the country to leave immediately, without delay or exception. This is not a hypothetical drill. It is the stark reality concerning Yemen, a nation engulfed in chaos. This situation is not your typical travel advisory. It reflects a state of complete turmoil. Americans are strictly advised against traveling to Yemen, and for compelling reasons. A devastating civil war has ravaged the country since 2014, tearing it apart and creating one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The conflict involves multiple factions, including the internationally recognized government, Houthi rebels, who control large swaths of territory, including the capital Sana'a, southern separatists, and extremist groups like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, and ISIS affiliates. This complex and violent power struggle means that every single day brings new and unpredictable dangers. Airstrikes, kidnappings, widespread drone activity, and sudden armed clashes erupt frequently and without warning. Guess what? There is no functioning U.S. embassy in Yemen to offer assistance. It closed down years ago due to the escalating conflict and has not reopened. If you are an American and somehow find yourself in Yemen, you are entirely alone. There is no help coming, no designated safe zone, and no emergency hotline to call. Yemen is classified as Level 4, do not travel by the U.S. government, and this warning is issued with the utmost gravity, encompassing threats from terrorism, severe health risks due to collapsing infrastructure and outbreaks of diseases like cholera, civil unrest, arbitrary detention, and active armed conflict including missile attacks and landmines. Even humanitarian organizations that once operated extensively in Yemen are increasingly pulling back staff. Why? Because the situation is profoundly unstable and dangerous. Foreigners, particularly Americans, have been targeted by various groups for detention, used as bargaining chips, or worse. Many such incidents never even reach international news outlets. Thinking of flying in? Don't. Commercial flights into Yemen are virtually non-existent or extremely unreliable. Airports have been repeatedly damaged, blockaded, or captured by militias. And even if you could somehow land, what then? Reliable transportation like taxis is scarce, security is non-existent in many areas, and crossing checkpoints controlled by different, often hostile armed groups is incredibly perilous. Need medical assistance? Hospitals are overwhelmed, lack basic supplies, or have been bombed out entirely. Clean water? A scarce commodity. Basic services? In a state of total collapse. And forget about using credit cards. They are essentially worthless there. Every corner of Yemen presents extreme danger for outsiders, especially Americans. It is not merely a matter of bad timing or being unlucky. It is about the high probability of not making it out safely. This is why Yemen stands as one of the most restricted and forbidden places on Earth for U.S. citizens. The risks are catastrophic and unavoidable. Number 5. Somalia. Do pirates only exist in adventure movies and historical tales? Think again. There is a place where maritime piracy, though reduced from its peak, remains a tangible threat off its coast, where warlords effectively govern entire neighborhoods within cities, and where powerful terrorist organizations control significant portions of the countryside. That place is Somalia. For Americans considering travel, getting in is almost impossible, and the risks are exceptionally high. The United States does not have a fully operational embassy providing comprehensive consular services in Somalia. While a diplomatic presence was re-established after nearly 3 decades, services remain extremely limited, and the ability to assist U.S. citizens in distress is severely constrained. The last time the U.S. had a major presence, it ended with a full-scale military evacuation and rescue operation during the tumultuous early 1990s, famously depicted in Black Hawk Down. Since then, while some progress has been made in stabilizing parts of the country, particularly the capital, Mogadishu, profound dangers persist. Nothing has fundamentally changed regarding the overall risk level for travelers, except perhaps that the danger has evolved and, in some areas, intensified. This nation remains under a level 4, do not travel advisory from the U.S. State Department, and for very good reason. Al-Shabaab, a violent extremist group affiliated with Al-Qaeda, operates freely throughout much of southern and central Somalia. They routinely carry out attacks targeting hotels frequented by foreigners, government buildings, airports, and even civilian populations. You would be shocked how often attacks occur that receive little to no international media coverage. But guess what? It is not just the threat of terrorism. Crime is rampant, including frequent kidnappings, particularly targeting foreigners and aid workers. Americans are often viewed as high-value targets for ransom or political leverage. If you are not held for ransom, there is a real risk of simply disappearing altogether. And consider this. Somalia's infrastructure is virtually non-existent in many regions. There is no stable national power grid, leading to frequent and prolonged outages. Reliable cell phone service is patchy at best outside major urban centers. And in many areas, particularly those outside government control, there is effectively no rule of law. If something goes wrong, you cannot simply call the police, because a functioning, reliable national police force does not exist consistently across the country. Traveling between cities is incredibly hazardous. Roads are often controlled by various armed groups or clans, and checkpoints can materialize overnight, manned by unpredictable forces. Just crossing town can become a life-or-death gamble. Even the capital, Mogadishu, while experiencing periods of relative stability compared to the past, is still riddled with danger. Bullet holes scar buildings, armored vehicles patrol streets, and neighborhoods can shift from relatively safe to hostile in a matter of hours due to clan disputes or militant activity. Somalia isn't just off the beaten path. It's effectively off every map of safe travel. For U.S. citizens, it remains one of the most forbidden and dangerous countries on Earth. Number 4. Venezuela. Imagine waking up to discover that the money in your pocket has lost 99% of its value almost overnight, effectively becoming worthless. Picture your entire monthly paycheck barely covering the cost of a single basic meal. Envisage a reality where you cannot trust the government, where electricity vanishes for hours or even days at a time, and where you feel trapped in a nation where essential necessities, food, clean water, healthcare, are desperately scarce. Does this sound like a dystopian nightmare? Regrettably, this reflects daily life in Venezuela, a country deep in the throes of a catastrophic freefall. Let us face it, Venezuela is collapsing. Once one of the wealthiest oil nations, boasting the world's largest proven reserves, mismanagement, corruption, and political turmoil under the regimes of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro have led to economic ruin and a profound humanitarian crisis. Would you be shocked to learn how rapidly this nation descended from prosperity to peril, becoming one of the most dangerous and economically unstable countries globally? Inflation has reached astronomical levels, the highest ever recorded in the country's history, rendering the local currency, the bolivar, practically useless, often compared to monopoly money. A simple pack of basic supplies can cost more than several months' wages for the average citizen. And here is the kicker. Essential items like food and medicine are in critically short supply. When they do occasionally appear on shelves, they are priced so exorbitantly that most Venezuelans cannot afford them. But guess what? Even though the government's catastrophic mismanagement has brought the nation to the brink, the situation gets even worse. The streets are perilous. Crime rates have skyrocketed across the country. Kidnappings, violent robberies, and assaults are frequent occurrences. Local residents live in constant fear daily, and for an outsider, one can only imagine how much more vulnerable they would be. The U.S. State Department maintains a Level 4, do not travel advisory for Venezuela, citing rampant crime, pervasive civil unrest, abysmal health infrastructure, the high risk of kidnapping, and the potential for arbitrary arrest and wrongful detention of U.S. citizens. The U.S. Embassy in Caracas suspended operations in March 2019, meaning there is no official U.S. presence to provide consular assistance. Americans traveling here face not only the ambient danger, but also the risk of being specifically targeted or caught up in political tensions. The Maduro regime has detained U.S. citizens on dubious charges in the past. Political unrest is rampant. You have large segments of the population who are frustrated, desperate, and trying to survive in a country losing control. Would you feel safe if you were stranded in a place where almost everyone is fighting just to make it through the day? It is not just about what you cannot buy. There is no consistent infrastructure, no reliable public transportation, and in some areas, effectively no law enforcement. The government's grip on power is tenuous at best. For U.S. citizens, traveling to Venezuela means taking an immense risk. Some Americans have attempted visits, often for family reasons, only to find themselves trapped without a viable way out. Venezuela has transformed from a nation of potential into one its own people are fleeing in droves. If you are an American contemplating a visit, think twice, because you will not just face danger, you will be caught in the wreckage of a nation on the brink. Number 3. Cuba. You likely picture Cuba as a vibrant tropical paradise, don't you? Sun-drenched beaches, classic cars rolling down Havana streets, world-famous cigars, and smooth rum. It sounds idyllic, almost frozen in a charming past. But here is the unvarnished truth. Cuba is a land of stark extremes. While undeniably beautiful, it is also a country operating under constraints that feel like a time warp, and daily existence for the average Cuban is far from easy. And guess what? The Cuban government maintains tight control over virtually everything. From the food available in state-run stores to the people you are permitted to interact with extensively, very little happens without the regime's implicit or explicit approval. This is not an environment where personal freedom, as understood in Western democracies, truly thrives. It is a place where censorship is the norm, and restrictions permeate many aspects of life. For Americans, travel to Cuba is particularly complex. While not impossible like North Korea or Syria, it is heavily restricted. General tourism is officially prohibited by U.S. law. Americans wishing to visit must qualify under one of 12 specific categories of authorized travel, such as family visits, journalistic activity, professional research, educational activities, religious activities, or participation in public performances or workshops. Simply booking a flight and hotel for a beach vacation is not legal for U.S. citizens under current regulations. Even for those who qualify for legal travel, the experience is far from a carefree holiday. You would be shocked by how difficult it can be to find reliable internet access outside of designated Wi-Fi hotspots, which often require purchasing expensive access cards. Good luck staying connected if you need to book a flight change or contact family back home urgently. The infrastructure in Cuba, while functional in tourist zones, shows its age and limitations elsewhere. Expect potential issues with running water, electricity stability, and the availability of goods we take for granted. While the charming image of classic cars is real, it also reflects the economic realities and lack of access to modern vehicles for most Cubans. Moreover, let us not forget the political situation. Cuba is known for government surveillance, particularly of foreigners. While the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba saw some relaxation in recent years, tensions persist, and the underlying political differences remain significant. There have long been concerns about surveillance targeting U.S. citizens, and interactions are often monitored. Even the most innocent conversations could potentially be intercepted or noted by authorities. So, if you are an American imagining a simple, relaxing trip where you can blend in unnoticed, think again. The government is acutely aware of your nationality, and while overt hostility towards tourists is rare, the potential for scrutiny or running afoul of complex regulations exists. Would you still want to visit Cuba knowing that navigating this controlled system could present unexpected challenges or put you in a difficult situation? It is definitely not the straightforward tourist paradise it is sometimes portrayed to be. The Cuban people are incredibly resilient and welcoming, but they live under constant government oversight, with limited internet access and restricted rights. For Americans, visiting legally requires careful planning and adherence to strict U.S. regulations, and even then, the on-the-ground reality can be challenging. Number 2. Nigeria. Imagine residing in a country where violence and danger seem to lurk around every corner, a constant, pervasive threat. Welcome to Nigeria, a nation grappling with multifaceted security crises, including powerful terrorist groups, rampant kidnappings for ransom, and widespread gang violence. Would you be shocked to hear that this nation of over 200 million people faces such intense and varied security challenges simultaneously, with regions like the Northeast experiencing relentless attacks from Boko Haram and its offshoot, the Islamic State West Africa province, ISWAP? These groups carry out bombings, raids on villages, and attacks against military installations. In the Northwest and North Central states, heavily armed bandits and kidnapping rings terrorize communities, making travel extremely dangerous. Even the southern coastal regions are not immune, facing significant problems with crime, including armed robbery and piracy in maritime areas. In addition to the pervasive violence, Nigeria's infrastructure is severely underdeveloped in many areas. This deficit impacts basic services like healthcare and transportation, making them unreliable, particularly outside major cities. Travelers face not only the danger of violence but also significant health concerns, including prevalent diseases like malaria and yellow fever. Being caught unprepared without proper vaccinations or medical precautions in such an environment could be disastrous. And guess what? Even with Nigeria's substantial oil wealth, corruption is rampant and deeply entrenched at various levels of government and society. This systemic corruption hinders development and exacerbates the struggles of daily life for most Nigerians. For Americans considering travel to Nigeria, it presents an absolute and undeniable risk. The U.S. State Department currently advises its citizens to reconsider travel, Level 3, to Nigeria overall, but issues a Level 4, do not travel warning for specific states, including Borno, Yobe, Kogi, and northern Adamawa, due to terrorism and kidnapping, and Bauchi, Gombe, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Sokoto, and Zamfara states due to kidnapping. Travelers face not only the direct threat of violence from extremist groups and criminal gangs, but also health risks and the challenges posed by unreliable infrastructure and systemic corruption. Would you risk it? Even with the economic potential and vibrant culture Nigeria possesses, the security situation remains precarious. This is not a place where one can assume safety or rely on consistent protection. Navigating the country requires extreme caution, situational awareness, and often, professional security arrangements, especially when venturing outside the relative security of major commercial hubs like Lagos or Abuja. The complex interplay of terrorism, crime, and resource scarcity makes Nigeria a profoundly challenging environment for travelers, particularly Americans who might be perceived as targets. Number 1. Myanmar, formerly Burma. Envision a nation where a military dictatorship exerts absolute control over every aspect of daily existence, where peaceful protests are met with lethal force, and where the constant fear of arbitrary arrest hangs heavy in the air. This is the reality in Myanmar, a country still reeling from the devastating military coup d'etat that occurred in February 2021. Would you be shocked to learn that since the coup, thousands of civilians have been killed or wrongfully detained by the military junta? In Myanmar, peaceful demonstrations against the regime were swiftly and brutally suppressed, often turning into violent confrontations initiated by the armed forces. The country remains locked in a state of protracted civil unrest and conflict. Not to mention, egregious human rights violations are rampant. The military has been widely accused of committing atrocities, particularly against ethnic minorities like the Rohingya population in Rakhine State, actions that many international bodies have labeled as ethnic cleansing or genocide. Foreigners entering Myanmar are not immune to government scrutiny and potential danger. Visiting this nation is an extremely dangerous gamble, especially when political tensions are simmering just below the surface, ready to erupt at any moment. Would you want to risk being inadvertently caught up in a brutal military crackdown? The U.S. State Department maintains a Level 4 do not travel advisory for Myanmar, citing the pervasive civil unrest, active armed conflict in multiple regions, and the significant risk of wrongful detentions. The potential for arbitrary arrest and detention is a serious concern for foreign nationals, including Americans. The military junta operates with little regard for due process or international norms. These countries we have discussed starkly illustrate just how hazardous international travel can become when political instability, violent conflict, or oppressive regimes hold sway. From the iron grip of North Korea and the dangers within Myanmar's military state to the war zones of Syria, Yemen, and Libya, and the complex security challenges in Somalia, Nigeria, Venezuela, Iran, and even the controlled environment of Cuba, some places should simply be avoided by travelers, especially Americans, at all costs. If you found this exploration of dangerous destinations eye-opening, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with others who need to be aware of these risks. We will continue to bring you more in-depth and sometimes shocking content about global affairs. Do not miss out on what is coming next. Conclusion. So, we have journeyed through 10 countries where entry for American citizens is fraught with extreme difficulty, danger, or outright prohibition. As promised, here are our concluding thoughts. The reasons are varied and complex, ranging from deep-seated political hostilities and lack of diplomatic relations, as seen with North Korea and Iran, to active war zones and catastrophic humanitarian crises, like those in Syria, Yemen, and Libya. In other cases, such as Somalia and Nigeria, pervasive insecurity fueled by terrorism, crime, and weak governance makes travel incredibly risky. Nations like Venezuela suffer from near-total economic collapse and instability, while Cuba, despite its allure, operates under heavy government control and U.S. travel restrictions. Myanmar remains under the shadow of a brutal military dictatorship following a recent coup. What becomes clear is that the power of a U.S. passport is not absolute. Geopolitical realities, internal conflicts, specific government policies, and safety concerns create formidable barriers. The State Department's travel advisories, especially the Level 4 do not travel warnings, exist for critical reasons and should be heeded. Venturing into these regions often means navigating environments with little to no U.S. consular support, unreliable infrastructure, and a high risk of detention, kidnapping, or becoming collateral damage in ongoing violence. While the spirit of adventure is commendable, understanding the profound risks associated with travel to these specific nations is paramount for personal safety. The world remains vast and full of places to explore, but these 10 countries currently stand as stark reminders that some doors remain firmly closed or exceptionally perilous to open for American travelers. Thank you for joining us on our channel for this important discussion. Stay informed, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment.